Hello, everyone. Buonasera. I'm Ashley Kahn. I'm a music journalist, author, educator, and I want to say thanks to everyone here at Audiorama for making this conference possible. It's been an amazing weekend in an amazing place, and if one thing is clear, devo imparare a parlare italiano. Prossima volta. I promise. Welcome to the final big talk of the conference. For the next 90 minutes, we'll be talking with a man whose musical passions and creations have been seducing our ears for almost 40 years. He's known as a guitarist and a keyboardist, a singer and a songwriter, a music producer, educator, and author, and someone who has taken the idea of limiting oneself to a single musical style and throwing it out the window. He's also someone whose successes have shown that music can serve as an effective point of social connection and consciousness lifting. Please welcome Midge Ure. Midge, welcome to Europe. Welcome to the European Union, as it were. And of course, I mean that somewhat ironically, but also, I say that because if there's anyone who can see and has worked music as a point of connection between people and with the idea of making people aware of differences and bridging differences, it's yourself, especially with a song like Do They Know It's Christmas? And so suddenly the relevance of a song like that, just looking at the newspapers for the past week, it's suddenly really relevant all over again.
Thank you. Yeah, well, in regards to the EU thing, I am Scottish, so I might be coming back if you'll have me. And I'd like to say welcome to my hotel. I've decided to buy it. You know what? Music to me is everything. It's not just part of my life. It is my life. It has been my life for, as you say, 40 years professionally. More than 40 years, unfortunately, because music is something that affects all of us, whether we recognize that or not. It's there. It's in the ether. It's in the air. The way music is transmitted and passed on via the airwaves. You can't help but be affected by it, good or bad. And you're right. At a time like this, where the world seems to have gone crazy, music is one of the consoling sides that we have left. We seek music to make us happy. We seek music when we're sad. We put on sad records to make us even sadder. It enhances our emotions, and it's an incredibly important thing. Not just for me as a musician, but me as a consumer, me as a listener, and I find it odd being in an industry that seems to be floundering because of technology, which is a strange thing for me to say because I embrace technology hugely. So we're in a position of flux right now in our industry, but technology moves on, and we have to move with it, and we have to push it because there's possibly a technology round the corner which will enable the industry to get back on its feet the way it used to be.
The fact that you raised the theme of technology, that's obviously one of the themes of this conference here too. And you really were someone who at the beginning of your career, when a lot of musicians were kind of buying into that us versus them kind of mentality, the punk generation versus the rock gods that came before, and how they had to take them down. And then, of course, the punk aesthetic was DIY. You do it with a guitar, bass, drums, and that's it. But within a year or two, you were experimenting with synthesizers, and you had a synthesizer-based band with Visage, and was, moving on already. What about your personal DNA allowed you to go in that direction?
My DNA was simply experimentation. I could sing before I could play guitar. Singing was free. I didn't have to do anything for it. I didn't have to save up to do it. I just had this ability to make this noise. Guitar was my instrument and still is my instrument. But that was never going to stop me stepping outside of that realm. There are divisions in the music industry, in every walk of life, but in the music industry especially. And the divisions aren't necessarily made by the creators, by the musicians. They tend to be made by the media. So it's easy and lazy for the media to say, you are new romantic, whatever that is. You are heavy metal. You are art rock, Who said that music was like a library where you have to go to the art rock part to find the type of music you like? Who said that that type of music doesn't fit in this particular shelf? Because to me, it's all malleable. Music's either good or bad, and it doesn't matter what tag it has. So for me, when technology appeared, I was stupidly excited. I was like a schoolboy. All of a sudden, the noise I made in the guitar was fine, but it was only one noise. All of a sudden, someone gave me a tool that could make whatever noise I could imagine.
What instrument was it?
Synthesizer. I had a very simple, very basic synthesizer that didn't have preset buttons with preset sounds. A lot of knobs and switches, a lot of experimentation. So it could not only make every noise you could imagine, but a whole wealth of noises that you couldn't imagine. So it was infinite. This toy, this tool, was as limited as your imagination. And that's just phenomenal. And it also, you have to think of the period that this happened. This is the late 1970s, when Roland and Yamaha all of a sudden started making electronics. It wasn't just Moog synthesizers, which cost as much as a room in this hotel, to buy. It cost a fortune. All of a sudden the Japanese manufacturers were making something that was palatable. You could afford to buy one of these things. And you could make a record in your bedroom. It was unheard of. You could sit in your bedroom and create noises and record it on a little tape recorder and release it. It was a revolution. It was as punk as picking up a guitar and learning 3 chords and throwing a band together. It was punk that you plugged in, punk with electronics. And that just opened up this entire new world to me. So Visage, in 1979, it was an incredibly creative year. I wrote Fade to Grey with Visage. I wrote Vienna with Ultravox. It was just someone had given me the toys and the keys to the kingdom and just let me go. It was phenomenal, a great thing to have.
I just realized I pronounced the band with the American pronunciation. Visage. By the way, speaking of you having a voice and that being, I guess, your primary instrument, even before guitar, does everybody know the band that Midge was offered a gig in? Do you want to mention Malcolm McLaren and how that came about?
Back in 1975 or 1976, I was walking through the streets of Glasgow, my home city in Scotland, So I presume you can hear I've got a slight accent. And I was stopped by this English man on the streets, which sounds a bit odd. And he said, look, my friend is sitting in a car round the corner. Could you just have a quick word with him about music? And I thought, oh, okay. And the guy who stopped me, it transpires, he was, he turned out to be he was going to be the manager of The Clash, a guy called Bernie Rhodes. And he took me round to meet his friend round the corner, sitting in a car. And that was Malcolm McLaren, who was putting together the Sex Pistols. And he spoke to me for about half an hour and told me about the New York Dolls and his shop and Vivienne Westwood and all of the stuff that he'd been involved in. And I have to say, this man was the strangest looking man I'd ever seen. He was wearing a dog collar, really, in the streets of Glasgow, which is quite a brave thing to do. And of course, he tells me about this band he's putting together and asks if I would like to be in the band. But he hadn't asked if I was a musician, so I turned him down. And of course, the band was the Sex Pistols. So, yeah, maybe I wouldn't have been any good at spitting or something, I don't know.
But looking back, was there something about Malcolm's viewpoint of putting together the band and tying into the punk spirit of the time?
You got the feeling that this man was revolutionary. I mean, nobody in those days put a band together and didn't care whether they could play or not. You know, these days it's kind of accepted. You know, it's more to do whether you can dance or not rather than play. But back then it was a really odd thing to do. So he had a vision of what he wanted to achieve, but didn't quite know how to get there. And in fact, the truth is that the two of them were in Glasgow because they had in the trunk of their car a lot of very dubiously acquired equipment that they were trying to sell. So I turned down the Sex Pistols, but I bought an amplifier.
If you could have gotten into a time machine, would you have accepted at that point?
No, absolutely not. It just wasn't right for me. It just didn't feel right. And I, like all of us, we all make decisions, you know, in our lives. We all turn one way or the other. And maybe sometimes you look back and think, well, maybe if I'd turned left, great things would have happened. But maybe all the great things that did happen wouldn't have. So I've got no regrets at all.
Fantastic. The DIY aesthetic, the do-it-yourselfness of the punk era, and of course talking about synthesizer in the bedroom. It's like we're back there again. Yeah. You know, the technology has suddenly made home recording so possible, and distribution of music with YouTube and other sources, you know, on the internet. Can you talk about, you know, how the technology keeps pushing this? Is that something that we need to wait for, or is that DIY aspect always going to be there in the music?
Technology in any form is a tool. What drives technology is people. And what drives people is ideas. It's the 100 monkeys in a typewriter scenario. You know, you give 100 monkeys a typewriter, and given enough time, one of them will write the entire works of William Shakespeare. You know, that's an old adage. And it's true. If you have technology, and everyone has the same technology, the one person with an idea will come up with something brilliant. And the 99 who haven't got an idea will make nonsense. They'll make noise. And it's always the same. So technology is there to be used. And when it's used properly, that the desire to make it do more than it can do pushes technology forward. So there's a demand for it. You know, musicians need the tools. We already have limitations. How many people go and buy a new laptop because it's got a bigger hard drive? And you think, that'll be great. I'll never have to buy another hard drive in my life. Really? You know, within a month, it's full. You've jammed it full of everything. Well, that's what we do with technology. We get this new toy and you think, this is wonderful. Then, by exploring what it can do, you find its limitations. And you start saying to the manufacturers, if it could only, you know, and it's driven by the audience, it's driven by people, you know, not the creators. It's driven by the people who use the technology. They will demand that we want our toys to do something more. And that's why they beta test, especially in the music industry, with electronic software. You know, the manufacturers give it to the musicians and say, right, you do something with it. What can you do with this?
Go and play.
Go and play. So what can it do? You tell me the limitations we have. Because if they spent all the time beta testing it themselves, by the time it came out, it would be old. You know, it's redundant. So it's pushed by people. People demand more. And manufacturers of all commodities have to accommodate that.
You know, another theme that we're talking about here at the conference, of course, is the future of music. And no more is the future more prevalent, of course, than in music schools. And you've done some teaching. And I don't want to go back to that 100 monkeys metaphor, but if you are in a classroom filled with students who are dedicated to moving the music forward, finding a place for themselves, what do you tell them? What's the first thing you open with to both encourage them but also help give them guidance?
I spoke recently at Paul McCartney's school in Liverpool, the Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts. And I was sitting in front of 200-300 young music students. And they're all waiting to hear this wonderful nugget of information that I'm going to tell them, which will make their lives so much better. And as I'm sitting there talking about my past and how many records I'd sold, or my multi-album record deals that I had, which don't exist anymore, all that's gone, I realized that I may as well have been speaking Latin to them because it's not relevant in their lives. So I said to them, you have to be master of everything. There are no record labels going to sign you. It's highly unlikely you're going to get a tour because you don't have a record out there. But you do have these amazing tools. You have the internet. You have the ability to make the music on your own without getting in debt. You know, you can make a record in a bedroom with the right technology. I told them that you have to network like you wouldn't believe. Yes, you make an album. You're a solo artist. You make a record. So you need a drummer, and you need a bass player, and you need a keyboard player, and a producer, and an engineer, and whatever. All your friends who are in the same position as you, one of them's a bass player, one of them's a keyboard player, one of them's an engineer. Ask them. Get them to play on your record, and you play on theirs. It hasn't cost you a penny to do that. But you're tapping into resources that are already there. So you can make the music for no major outlay. You can make the music without taking your hat and going to a record company saying, please, can I have some cash to make this? So they had this ability in that room. They had everything they needed to pursue a career in music.
All the resources are there.
All the resources were sitting there, you know. And in the school itself, they had recording equipment. They now teach young kids about marketing, social media, everything. They teach them about publishing. I still don't understand what publishing does. It's a source. Somebody sends you a check every so often with some money on it, and you think, wow.
And it doesn't argue back.
It doesn't argue back. So they had it there in front of them. It's a bit like Judy Garland and her ruby slippers, looking for Oz. She was there all the time, it's there, but they just have to use those tools. So the future's bright. The future's still there. They just have to create their own path for it.
This again, staying with this DIY thing, the idea that there are many hats that you have to be familiar with as a musician now, as opposed to just being the singer in the band. That the idea of being a songwriter, of knowing the business inside and out, and working the community and the networking. Is this something that, you developed naturally on your own?
I've always been strange. When I wanted my own recording system. So the moment I first made any money at all was when I had this really strange experience. I was in a rehearsal studio with Ultravox, my band, in a really seedy part. All rehearsal studios in seedy parts. A really seedy part of London.
I think it's required now.
It's required, yeah. Sticky carpet, it's horrible. And my manager at the time turned up with 2 magnums of champagne. The champagne was unusual. The manager turning up at a rehearsal studio was really unusual. So I knew something was going on. And we said, well, what's happening? He said, you have 2 albums in the top 40 and 2 singles in the top 40. So
Fade to Grey in Vienna.
And it was Fade to Grey and I think it was maybe Sleepwalk or whatever, but the Vienna album and the Visage album all charted in the same week. So all of a sudden, my life was turned upside down. It was absolutely incredible. And the moment, it took a long time for the money to come in. So I found myself with these huge successful records and no telephone. I had to go to a telephone box at the end of the road and speak to my manager and say, well, what's happening? And he'd say, well, you've done 75,000 units today. And I'd go, that's great, thanks. Put the phone down. And I'd call up the next day to find out what happened. So when the money actually came in...
And you didn't want to use your cell phone?
Cell phone? The first thing I did was I bought a house and built a recording studio. I built my own facility. Not that I knew how to use it, but I taught myself. Because I figured out back in 1981 that at some point in my career, some faceless guy in a suit in an office in London was going to look at the financial chart and go, ooh, they're not doing very well. But with the tools, I could carry on making music. And that's precisely what I did. So since that day to now, I still have my own facilities. It's the recording studio is as much an instrument to me as the guitar or the keyboard. So it's a tool. The department that I teach at NYU, this is exactly the kind of thing that we try and make the students absolutely familiar, comfortable with the recording studio, and push them into it again and again, even if they feel they're not ready, they don't have music ready or whatever, just get very familiar with that environment so that when the creative juices do flow, you're going to catch them. One of the most impressive things that I think Midge has done recently is that he kind of put his money where his mouth is, as far as standing up in front of the students and saying, you really got to do this on your own. Midge did a whole tour of the United States on his own. It was called the Fragile Troubadour Tour. And the one question, who sold the T-shirts? I did. While I was talking to these students and realizing that what I was saying didn't make any sense. I decided that at the ripe old age of, I'm now 62, so I was probably 60 or something when I decided to do this. I booked a tour in America, 6 weeks.
No crew?
No crew,
no tour
manager, no adult. And I booked the flights, I drove the car, I booked the motels, I turned up at venues. Here's the thing. I did the settlement at the end of the night. I had to sign off on a piece of paper and someone handed me money, which has never happened in my entire life. So I had to be...
You've never been involved with the cash settlement?
No, someone else, the tour manager does that, and you worry about it later. But I decided to do this, and I documented this. I took a little camera, and I drove from coast to coast and north to south, border to border in America, talking to myself, talking to this camera, and just trying to show young musicians how difficult it could be. If it was that difficult for me, and I'm a reasonably established artist, how difficult is it going to be for them? So I did this thing, and I put it on the internet to let them see this. So yeah, it's putting your money where your mouth is. So,
Fragile Troubadour. Check it out. It's very interesting. When and what were the lessons learned? What were there any surprises? Any revelations?
I think it's. I think like anything, if you put an obstacle in someone's way, you've got a crowd of people, and you say, "Here's a wall." It's going to be difficult getting through that wall, or over it, or round it, or under it. The ones who don't really have the passion will stay on the wrong side of the wall. The ones that really want to do this will find a way through. And I put this up as this is a potential series of obstacles. Even to the extent that at one of the shows, the merchandising that I'd organized, the T-shirts and the CDs and things that you sell at the end of the show, they hadn't turned up in Santa Monica, and I was doing 2 shows in Santa Monica. And I pointed out on camera that had I been depending on making money on this tour, or not losing money on this tour, this was an experiment for me. Had they been doing this, and those T-shirts and CDs hadn't turned up, that could have been the difference between losing money and breaking even. Because the merchandising was 50 miles away. But for 2 shows, you couldn't sell those 20 CDs a night. And that makes the difference. And that was a massive realization to these kids that, wow, the margins are so slim. And I keep reading about artists, established artists in America, who cannot make a living playing music because it's so cost prohibitive. So it was a realization that this is a tough journey they've got in front of them. But as I say, the ones who have the heart will do it.
You got to respect the music and respect the margins, indeed. At some point, we're going to open it up to questions from you guys, so please be ready with any questions you have. One of the ideas that I've always been intrigued by, because the value of, there's a mountain of musical history out there, catalogs of recordings that are continually released, and certain artists are evergreen. A Miles Davis or a Johnny Cash, Sex Pistols or the Rolling Stones. Their older recordings continue to be out there. And the same with songs, and the idea that, like you in 1982 recorded The Man Who Sold the World, and how many different groups have approached that David Bowie classic, and from Nirvana to Lulu. And you did a great job on it too. And of course, you've approached your own music in that way, and that finding a future for past gems like Reap the Wild Wind. Do you want to talk about that and set up the track that we have for people?
I'm a melody guy. Everything I do has melody. It's all about the melody and the structure for the songs for me. It's not about the BPM. It's not dance music. It's a different genre. And I've looked back, which I very, very rarely do. I can't look back at what I've done in the past, because once it's done, it's done. But recently, I've had this, well, I suppose a bit of a realization that Ultravox, my band, should have been doing what Tangerine Dream have been doing for the last 40 years. We should be making film soundtracks. And it's taken a long time for me to realize that. And I look back at a lot of the old material from Ultravox right through to even some of the more current solo things. And I wanted to see if I could make the transition between making these rock, pop, electronic records and transform them into orchestrated soundtrack music. And I've been working hand in hand with a young musician in the UK, and doing this, looking at some of these key songs, and just taking them out of that, what you were saying earlier about the segmenting, segregating different types of genres of music, of taking something that was written as a piece of pop music and then putting it into an orchestral field. And weirdly, I've done a few concerts recently with a full orchestra and rock band and whatever. In fact, Audi sponsored a couple of those concerts a couple of years back. And it's an amazing thing when you hear an orchestra playing your melodies, playing your babies, your creations. So I've been playing with this. This is still work in progress. In fact, nobody's ever heard this yet. So I've got a little bit of Ultravox's Reap the Wild Wind, I think it is, I sent you. But orchestrated, so it gives you a flavour of what it is that I'm doing.
This is Marco. It's track 3, Trey.
You take my hand and give me your friendship. I'll take my time and show you my slow reply. Give me an inch and I'll make the best of it. Take all you want, leave all the rest to die. Go, are
I wish we had more time to play the whole track, but that sounds fantastic. So what do you plan on doing with that?
I'm not quite sure. Sometimes you have the idea, but you don't have the game plan. I will do it and I'll complete it, and I presume it'll come out at some point. It'll probably come out next year. But I've got to get it right. No, it's a movie without a movie. It's a soundtrack.
It's funny because Reap the Wild Wind is a classic film from the 1940s, and
Well, it was one of our tricks. We used to use film titles a lot.
Hiroshima, Mon Amour.
Hiroshima, Mon Amour, absolutely.
Yeah. John Fox days. Yeah. No, it's okay. Feel free to jump in. But the idea of finding the future in the past, the idea that music is a sustainable kind of commodity, I think is.
To me, a song's timeless. Talking about movies, it's a bit like movies that are like Batman. It's set in the future or is it set in the past? It's kind of got a bit of everything. The cars are old and the clothes are old, but the technology's brand new. So you see that a lot, and a lot of what we were doing. You listen to that, you think, oh, it's just an old-fashioned tune, but we were doing that with modern technology. We were 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the future, and that's the way it's always been. Car manufacturers are now making cars that look like retro cars, but with modern technology. And why wouldn't they? There's a huge amount of sales, music sales this year in America, something like 20% or something, is vinyl. So vinyl has made a comeback because there's something comforting about the style and the feel of what you know, but there's something hideously exciting about something that you don't know, and that's the future. Striving to see what it's like. Someone asked me today, what was my idea of the future when I was a young man? Flying cars. That's what we were all told it was going to be, but it's never that, because it evolves and moves in its own weird, peculiar way. But a combination of both is incredibly important to all of us.
The fact that we're even saying a flying car, means that we are basing it on present tense. To go back to the whole music school idea, the idea that musicians have to wear many hats. Another thing is, of course, being very aware of the business side, which at a certain point, especially in the 60s, it was like that was almost something that you didn't worry about. You let the manager take care of, etc. You obviously have been creating music for many functions, music as conveying a social message, music as conveying an emotion, a pure emotion, and been successful on all those levels. And you're also been involved, where I guess we're going to surprise people, with something that connects with Audi, where it's a very functional, almost Brian Eno kind of purpose.
Well, it's something that when we spoke a couple of days ago, you didn't know that this connection was already there. We're talking about this whole event is talking about looking forward. It's talking about where things are going, and by chance, I was doing this orchestral tour in Germany with a rock band and a variety of vocalists. Alice Cooper, me on stage with Alice Cooper. How bizarre!
Hell yeah!
And Audi were sponsoring this. And one of the key musicians involved in this tour was connected with Audi, and he was making soundscapes for them. He was making commercials for them. He was writing music for them. But then he told me about something that I'd never heard of before. He said that Audi had approached him with this idea that different cities that they have their showrooms in would have different musical influences, and asked him if he could put a project together where each city would have a slightly different piece of music that could be already installed in the car when they sold it. So if you bought a car in Berlin, you'd have a piece of music in the car that gave you the essence of Berlin or Cologne or wherever. And he asked me if I could get involved in one of these, and he didn't give me much of a brief. He said, it's Audi, it's about driving, it's about movement, it's about freedom, It's about the feeling you get when you get inside a vehicle and what you're thinking. And they just sent me a track, and I started talking over this track. So, and a Scottish, it's not a rap, but a Scottish twang being spoken over this piece of music, and a little bit of vocals on it. And it set the whole thing up. I just thought it was really interesting. I'm not sure what came of it, but I have a little snippet of the music here for you. But the idea of a car manufacturer being so enamored with what sound does, what music does, the compatibility of all the sensory elements. You get in a car and you smell it. It's the first thing you do. You smell the car. You feel it. It's tactile. It's leather. It's wood. It's steel. It's whatever. You know. What do you do next? You hear it. You hear it start. You hear the music. You hear the sound. You hear the. You put the windows up and it goes quiet. You know. That's all the sensory elements happening. And I thought it was incredibly forward-thinking of any car manufacturer to think, well, maybe our cars in our cities should have something that's absolutely specific to them. Now you're going to ask me which city this is associated with.
You read my mind.
Right, I have no idea.
A city of your own making. This is track number 1, Marco, if you would. In a car now selling in Utopia. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's even before Audi themselves have heard it, right? You guys, that's how special we are in this room. You know, the one of the other things that we did during the conference was we did a showing of or planned to do a showing of the David Bowie film, Absolute Beginners. And there's a wonderful line of, you know, David plays an ad man in there. And the young kid, the photographer, you know, says, you know, well, we're here to sell things, right? And he goes, sell things? We're here to sell dreams. And the way that you described this whole thing, I mean, and that was a dreamscape, really. Congratulations with it. Good luck. I can't help but also, you know, recognize that back in 1996, when Midge brought out an album that did not exactly hit the charts, but boy, did it do well here in Italy. Do you want to talk about that? Because that's your Italian connection, big time.
I have a few Italian connections. Yeah, I made an album I believed at the time was quite possibly one of the best records I had made, a good collection of songs. And I put the album out, and it very quickly became the worst selling record I'd ever made, ever. And it died. For 2 years, it died. Nobody heard this. And I was naturally not in a good place to go and start making a new record. You know, you think the world doesn't need another Stiff. And a fan in Italy whose job it was to put contemporary music together with TV commercials took the title track of this album. He bought it the day it came out. And he thought it was an absolute sin that no one was going to get to hear this piece of music. And he took it to a watch company who used the title track on a TV commercial. And the TV commercial was for Swatch. And the song was called Breathe. And thank God for Italians, because they fell in love with this little piece of music. And they phoned up all the radio stations saying, "Who is this?" And they didn't know. So I was faceless, ageless. No social media. Nobody could find out anything. So they phoned the radio stations. Of course, the radio stations looked to find out who this was. They asked the record label. They got it. Found out that they had the CD in the library for 2 years, but had never played it. Of course, Breathe became a massive hit. It was #1 in Italy for 6 months or something. It was ludicrous. Bounced all around the world. It was great. So I thank you for that. My children thank you for that.
Grazie mille. Let's open it up to you guys. Any questions, comments, etc.?
Another Italian connection. Because Stanley doesn't know, but I had a TV show called Mr. Fantasy. In 1981 it started. It was the first show worldwide based on video clips, because MTV came along 2 or 3 months afterwards. And I don't exactly remember the year, but probably 1982, maybe, not really at the beginning. But anyway, Ultravox came along, and it was the wave of video clips, of course. Video clips changed the industry around, and changed TV, changed ads, changed a lot of stuff. The rhythm of the video clip, the way that they were edited and everything. And of course, it changed also the way that, you know, musicians could open, you know, to countries where they couldn't be physically. And that, I don't know if it was, I don't remember if it was a trilogy. No, I certainly remember Vienna, and which was, they were not necessarily the video clips that you see now with a lot of effects, you know, very rich. Vienna was a very basic track. It was a very suggestive, evocative kind of video clip. You know, you guys with trench coats walking around, black and white, which was very interesting, as opposed to color. And that started, I suppose, also an era for you. I mean, you were among the pioneers. You were the first ones to deal with that medium. So, would you recollect that era? And tell us also, well, how important it was for you, I suppose it was, but also what is, looking back, your place in the history of video clips?
The video clips, I remember prior to the Vienna video clip, we had made one for a song called Passing Strangers. And on that first clip we made, we set up all the parameters that were to follow. So instead of shooting on video, we shot on 16mm film. And we cropped the screen, top and bottom, to make it look like CinemaScope. We used a great director, a guy called Russell Mulcahy, who went on to do Elton John and loads of people, Duran Duran.
It was the beginning of the career of a lot of very famous, you know, Julian Temple, sure. Russell. And
in fact, Julian Temple's in the original Vienna video with a spider on his face. But I remember, because if you remember back to, you know, early Saturday night television, which is the programs that we were always sent out to do, not just in Italy and all over Europe. And you'd turn up to play your latest piece of art on a Saturday night television show in between the dancing dog and the topless dancers. And we just thought, why are we here? Why are we doing this? This is crazy. You know, we're young, you know. So we went to the record label and said, look, we want to make a video clip. They said, what for? I said, well, Vienna. They said, well, it's already number 2 in the charts. What's a video clip going to do? And they wouldn't give us the money to make the clip. So we went to the bank and we borrowed £17,000 and made the video on our own. We did it. And of course, they didn't understand. It's a bit like the discussion about MP3s with record labels. They didn't get it. They couldn't understand that with one video, we could be on television on the same night in Milan and Dusseldorf and Oslo and whatever, because we were giving them better television than they could afford to make. We spent 3 days, 4 days making 3 minutes of television that they put into their program, which meant they had 3 minutes less to worry about, and it was great quality television. And it changed everything. As you say, when MTV started months after you did, they had a great idea. They had no content. They didn't have anything to show. So what did they show? All our stuff. It was wonderful. You know, all the Europeans had video clips, and the Americans didn't. So it changed everything. It was a bit of a revolution.
Was it planned?
It wasn't planned. It was something that we were one of the few artists who not only the record company had nothing to do with us making records except giving us the money. We found a producer. We made the music we wanted to make. We gave it to the record company. It was an artistic, absolutely. But
it gets transformed into a marketing tool.
Well, it does. It did get transformed into a marketing tool. But at the beginning, you have to understand, record companies didn't have it written in contracts. Within a year of making the Vienna video, all artists' contracts changed, and the contracts then stated, "You must make a video. You must make a video." And up until that point, there's nothing about videos in there. So Ultravox made the music with the producers we wanted to work with. We presented the thing to the record company. We found Peter Saville, who did the artwork, because the sleeve that the record went in was just as important. Yeah. And the images and the graphics and the typeface and the fonts and the video and all of that stuff was equally important. You know, and I have to tell you, once videos started taking off, I used to get these scripts sent through to me from directors, and they would all say the same thing. They'd all say, "I see," insert a name, whoever. "I see Kylie, you know, standing in a field with shafts of light," and you could take the name out and put any name. "I see Justin Bieber, I see whoever." Same video. The video had nothing to do with the music. And because we controlled it, we had
it was
images.
An extension,
absolutely,
basically, of the... because
it was based on the lyrics, it was based on the idea of the song, it was, you know, it was compatible.
It was very connected with the music, because obviously when you came into Ultravox, with John Fox, Ultravox, probably the most similar band today is Radiohead. And you come out, you're the only example in pop music in which the band changes the singer and gets better. Maybe the other is Genesis, commercially, I mean under commercial terms. Maybe you produce this sort of, because you work with great people as you, like Connie Plank, and it was a sort of a slicker Kraftwerk, that record for me. Very Middle Europe. It wasn't an English record at all. But you've been a very good melodist, and your writing reminds me of ABBA. I hope you don't take it as an offense, your sense of melody. And I think ABBA is an excellent sense of melody. you were not ahead of the curve. You were almost the curve in that way. But that takes me to the future. When we talk about the future, you're the perfect example in which first there's the idea. And when I hear these kids talking about disrupting and all that shit, to me today it's very restoration in which the system is more important than the idea. I always think that a marketing tool can only come from an artistic idea or even from an artistic need, and has to do with a lot of cultural comparisons. In one of your solo records, the one If I Was, I think it was the single, there's a song about an architect, if I'm not wrong, C.J. McIntosh, which is called The Gift, right?
Yeah.
And that's what really we are missing today. Basically, the marketing tool itself, the market is more important than the idea, which is what you say about the video.
Well, unfortunately, it's the
So
way...
the future is bleak, in my opinion.
Yeah,
to
of
be
course,
honest.
it's wrong. You're correct, but the system is wrong because of what's happened with MP3s, no money going into the industry, artists not generating enough income to keep themselves alive. We don't have the same net that we could find the great people, the oddities, what I would call the oddities, who come along and turn everything upside down. And there's a reason, I was saying earlier, there's a reason that we have lost a lot of the real interesting artists. They're not coming to the fore. And that's come at the same time as we've got karaoke talent shows on television. We're never going to find the next John Lennon, singing on The Voice.
Well, he wouldn't make it to the casting.
No, neither would
Probably.
I wouldn't get anywhere
kicked
near
out.
it. Even if I had hair, I wouldn't be allowed anywhere near it. So it's true. The system is wrong, but unfortunately it's the way it is. We have to deal with it.
Hi. Charlie slightly anticipated a question I want to ask you, which is from the point of view of a teenager in his bedroom in the mid-80s in Italy, Ultravox were a very strange beast since you were a British band apparently looking with great interest to Europe and to mid-Europe especially. So I want to ask you how much it was a fascination and where that fascination came from.
It wasn't a fascination. I think if you look at the base elements of Ultravox, our keyboard player, Billy Curry, was a classically trained violin player. So he was steeped in European music. His entire background was European music. Then you've got Warren Cann, who's Canadian, and you've got Chris, who was from London, and me from Scotland. So we were kind of Benetton band, we were kind of from all over the place, But the European thing was what we were. None of us, and I mean this, and I don't mean this in a horrible way. We had this thing about making music that was ours. I mean, when I play guitar, I play a very bluesy guitar. That's what I play. That's what I was brought up on. I was playing that way, that style of guitar, long before I ever reached the shores of America, because that's what I was fed. That's what was there. But we wanted to explore the fact that we were European. Not that we are anymore, of course, but we were Scottish. We were European, and we wanted to explore that. So everything we had, all our reference points, were dark, dull, wet, miserable cities. Glasgow is a haunting, atmospheric place, just as much as the back streets of Berlin. And we had this thing, and of course, what we were listening to was coming out of here. We were listening to Kraftwerk and Giorgio Moroder and La Dusseldorf and Can and Neu, all of those things, and that was part of our world. So why would we, as a British-based European band, start trying to make Americanized music? We were the Antichrist when it came to. I can't say that in a church, can I? We were the opposite of what everyone else was trying to do at the time. And when Visage made Fade to Grey, It was one of the first white European dance records. It was nothing about that record that was remotely black or R&B or American or everything else that dance music seemed to come from. This was the opposite again. And of course, in a weird way, when house music started in Chicago, it was because they were influenced by Kraftwerk, Ultravox, Visage. They loved the noises we were making. So they took white dance music and turned it into what they already had. And it's amazing. But that's kind of how it is. You know, it's not plagiarism, it's influences. You have to be open to it all. But we were very much this European band with this European sound. And we didn't want any kind of bluesy black influence in that, because it wasn't part of our makeup, it wasn't part of who we were at that moment in time.
May I just ask a very short piece of a question to the question before? Maybe possibly you remember a B-side called Break Your Back, talking about being influential in terms of house music a couple of years later. But that track was in some way influenced or evocate something about hip-hop or breakdance possibly. Is that correct?
I don't see it in that, because I know that wasn't an influence. But you have to look at how music does merge. You know, you look at New Order and Blue Monday, and you think, okay, that's obviously a dance record. Of course it is. It was produced in New York, but it's so European in its sound. Right, but that's it. It started. The divide stopped and the blend started, and that's how influences spread.
And it's funny how today the technology is so available that we could do that very easily. The more it gets very channeled, and I think it's always about the artistic search. You were searching something and you were getting inspired. I mean, I know you since you were in the Rich Kids, but you were searching for something, you're taking these influences. I think what's really missing, I mean, to me, Google is not searching, it's not finding.
I think
If you catch my drift.
I do get your drift, and I think the desire for people to make their mark is there. I think the real downside of it is that people want to be famous. First and foremost, that's it. If you speak to young musicians, most young musicians now, most young singers, and ask them what they want. They want to be famous. No, they want to be a Kardashian. They want to be whatever it is. They want to be on television. Not for anything. They just want to be famous. Whereas 30 years ago, you ask a 16-year-old school kid, what do you want to be? They'll say an engineer, or a doctor, or a vet, or whatever. Now they want to be famous. And it's something wrong with our culture that's allowed that to happen.
If I understood well, because we were recollecting before the talk starts, the Breathe case. So it started from Italy, but the song went on the Swatch ad worldwide, or it just was an Italian thing?
No, it was European-wide.
European, okay.
Everywhere except the UK. So
Okay.
I had this massive hit, and
Okay.
I was still a failure in the UK.
But it started creatively from somebody in Italy.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Started here.
Okay. And of course, I think we all want to touch the point of Do They Know It's Christmas? So the song and how it, what was the starting point of the whole thing?
It was Bob Geldof and I's one collaboration. I'm not sure we'd ever do it again. As these things happen, that was never planned, ever. Nobody knew what was going on. Back in 1984, Ethiopia was a communist country. The famine that we saw in 84 had been going on since 1982. But because it was a communist country, they didn't ask for help. They didn't want to be seen to ask for help. So I was doing a music television show in the north of England, and it was hosted by Bob's girlfriend at the time, who was hugely pregnant. And Bob called her up to find out how she was. He was at home. Boomtown Rats were finished. He was looking after the children or child, whatever. And he asked if I could be put on the phone. He said, I've just seen this thing on the news. It's disgusting. I want to do something, but I don't feel I can do it myself. Can you help? And we met up and talked about what we could do and came to the obvious conclusion eventually that the only thing we can do is we're we're songwriters. That's it. We write a song. We realized that we couldn't just, if we wanted to have a Christmas number one, because if you, and I'm sure it's the same here, if you get a record to the number one position the week before Christmas, the charts freeze. So you stay there the week before Christmas, you stay there the week of Christmas, and you stay there New Year into January. So you get 4 weeks at number one, which can generate a lot more than any other time of year. So we wanted a number one record, but we couldn't just record a standard Christmas song, which would have been easy, because 50% of the money would have gone to Irving Berlin's estate. Yeah, so we couldn't do that. We had to write something. So I went home from us having a chat and sat in my kitchen with a little toy Casio keyboard and on a little bell sound. And I thought, that'll do, that's fine. And I sent it to Bob on a cassette, who phoned me up straight away and said, this is shit. And I said, okay. Then he came to my house the next day. Bob's left-handed, so he plays a right-handed guitar upside down, but it had hardly any strings on it. It looked like him. And he started singing this thing, oh, Christmas time, and he sang this thing that he was obviously making up. And I recorded him on a cassette and said, leave it with me. And I went into my studio that I just built, of course, and bought, and started building this thing. I played all the instruments on the record. I did a lot. Phil Collins played the drums. So I did this thing while Bob got on my phone and phoned up all the artists.
So he's been the PR.
Well, he's not very good in the studio. He talks all the time.
Okay.
You can't hear what you're supposed to be doing because he's going.
But he's good at calling people. He's
brilliant. No, nobody says no to Bob.
Okay,
you don't say no.
That's fantastic.
And so he got on with that side of it. I got on with making the record, and we had that one day in the studio that everyone saw. The one day when all the artists turned up. And interestingly, that the first piece of advice Bob and I were given after we formed the Band-Aid Trust, we put a body of people together to help us do this. Television executives, music business managers, lawyers, and we are still, to this day, the Band-Aid Trust. But the first piece of advice we ever got about doing something like this was from George Harrison, who had tried to do it with Concert for Bangladesh, and all the money was eaten up on overheads, offices and payment. To this day, Band-Aid has never had an office, a secretary, a telephone, nothing. We do everything. We beg, steal and borrow everything. And we've managed to do that. The only people who get paid are the accountants, because they are responsible for all that money, not us. So we're absolute. It was George said, get yourselves great accountants and make sure the money goes where it's meant to go. And that's what we've done.
So it still generates money.
Yeah. Well, it's a record. I mean, idiot songwriters, 2 idiot musicians. All we could think of was getting this thing to number 1 that year. Just that year. Neither of us thought, well, it's a Christmas record, it'll happen every year. But it has. So it's been number 1 many, many times. It's been covered. There was, you know the program Glee?
Of course.
Right, okay, right. Those guys did a Christmas special about 4 years ago. And on the Christmas special, they did a version of Do They Know It's Christmas? That version alone generated $500,000. So every time that record's played, money goes straight into the Band-Aid Trust and goes straight back out again to, you know, to fund the numerous projects we're funding over there. So music does make a difference, yeah. Thank you.
It underscores the whole idea of timelessness, once again in music, that music is its own future. It carries its own future, at least the promise of what's going to be, you know, in the days and years ahead. Do we have any other questions? Guys? Oh, Randall?
Is there anyone that's caught your ear that has heart that you feel is doing something that may make a difference?
You know what? Good stuff always wins. You know, there are a handful of interesting artists out there who, in fact, the one I'm thinking of right now, I'm going to say Sigur Rós, who've been around for a few years, but Sigur Rós don't make things easy for themselves. An Icelandic band. Textural music, I think very similar in a way to Ultravox and Radiohead and that genre music. But they sing in a language that they make up. So it's not commercialized music at all. But it kind of rises to the top. It does something, it ticks a box. It's inspiring for anyone who thinks, I don't want to be on television dancing. I don't want to be singing I love you, you love me, let's get together and make 3. I want to say something, I want to do something. So to find a band who are so kind of left field, who still manage to make it on a commercial basis and still immensely popular is very inspiring. There's a lot of great songwriters out there. There seems to be more of it. I mean, I don't want to paint the industry too black. I think we've been through the worst of it, and the good stuff is starting to pop their heads up now, because there are alternatives, and because what we were saying about these young musicians, they're being taught what to do, they're being taught what's important, not what you're wearing, not how your hair looks, you know, not if the lighting's just right. It's about the content, you know. Let's hear some heart, let's hear some reality. You know, let's hear some passion coming out of radio. I'm so tired of driving along in my little car and turning the radio down because another piece of shit has just come on. He's like, oh, please. You know, turn it up so you can hear the DJ.
That's why you need the soundscape for out.
There we go. But there's, you know, it's there, and it's starting to come up. It's starting to raise its head now. So things are kind of, you know, revolting. As long as people accept what they're given and don't complain about it, they'll keep being given the same thing. You always do what you always did. You always get what you always got. You know, so it's young people need to have a revolution.
Thanks, Randall. Wow, what a privilege to be here. Please join me in thanking Midge Ure. How lucky are we? And thank you, Audi, for making this moment possible. It's been an honor. Thank you all.